Welcome to Worst Quality Crab, a podcast of Asian American stories and recipes from best quality hearts. I'm your host, Freesia Lee. Joining me as always is my husband and producer, Sam.
Hello.
Joining us this episode, oh, I'm so excited already. Sorry, I just really am. Joining us is Eli Beutel. Eli is a food, culture, and law historian who accidentally became a pseudo-expert in Hittite bee law. I have questions. And hates the texture of hot fruit. I have more questions. Hi, Eli.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited.
Me too. Let's just lay this out for listeners. We are very excited for this episode because it's sort of the anti-episode. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So if you're new here, generally on the show, the premise is people come on and they share their beloved childhood dishes that bring back fond memories. And then we talk about like what that meant in their childhood and what that means for them today and all of the things related to food because it is the universal love language amongst Asian cultures. This one is not that.
No.
This one we're calling Revenge Recipe, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm so into this. Also, I do think that like there is a genuine like people like this recipe, so we will share it. Don't worry, listeners. I think it takes you 6 months to make. It's fine. But I'm super into this. One, because if we're being very honest, this is Friday after the election and everything's fucked. So like, let's just do some revenge recipe, anti-everything, because apparently that's how we're going. So fuck that. So here we are. Let's let it rage on this one. But also, let's also be honest, not every childhood food memory is a joyous one. And that needs space too. So here we are. Eli.
Yes.
What is this recipe and why do you loathe it so?
So this is a traditional German Christmas dish. For the record, I'm half Asian, half German. And this was my grandmother's recipe for Stollen. It's also called Weihnachtsstollen or Kreisstollen, depending on where you are in Germany.
Tell us about this. What is it? It's a bread? A cake?
Both. So anybody familiar with the Italian panettone or the English fruit cake?
Yes.
Will kind of have an understanding of what it is. Imagine both of those, but denser.
What?
Oh, how can it get any denser?
You should be able to take one of these loaves, and it does make multiple loaves. There's no option to reduce the recipe. And swing it around and beat a man.
Oh
God. I mean, hey, we might need this in the coming years.
The recipe is measured in pounds.
Wow. Oh, God.
Would you like a little history of the dish?
Yes, please. Because I'm like, oh my God, I have so many questions about making it and eating it. And give us the history, please.
Yes.
History nerd that you are.
So we don't know exactly when Stollen was first made, although indications indicate sort of the medieval period. Some records say as early as the 1300s, although our first real concrete written account of this dish occurs in the 1400s.
And it is made of concrete. Sounds like.
Basically, it took a very different form back then because there were heavy restrictions on butter and sweetness. The church very much did not want people to feel joy during Advent. So it was very much just a flour, water, yeast, maybe kind of dish.
Oh, great. Yeah. No joy in your desserts. Fun.
It was the medieval period.
Sure.
Then later on, they added butter, which was a very, very big deal. That seemed to occur about the 1500s when it was a gift to the Pope. And the Pope got to decide sort of what level of joy you experienced around the Christmas season.
I mean, thanks for that, Pope, because butter's pretty joyous.
What I read, it was one of the Pope innocents. So,
okay.
And then eventually it sort of became the dish it became today. We know it sort of originated around Dresden, although my family is from northern Germany, so it seems to have spread around. And then in recent years, it has become popular in places like England.
Okay. It still sounds terrible. I just... Thank you. That was way more, when you were like the history of the dish, way more than I anticipated. Perfect. It's funny because we're always like, where do these like Chinese American dishes come from? And then we just like make up all these wild theories about like, tomato season, whatever. And you just came and you're like, no, actually, here we go. Oh, maybe you should do all of the research for all of the things.
I do actually know the history about a lot of Chinese American dishes.
What?
Yes.
Wait, why? Wait, oh my God.
It's similar to Italian American dishes.
Okay, Stollen, hold on. Talk about this more.
Yeah, so...
how do you know this, first of all?
I'm a food historian.
Yeah, no, I did say that, didn't I? Okay.
Go on.
Go on.
So the first real sort of Americana fusion dish that we sort of made was actually Italian. And all sort of fusion dishes come out of experimentation and necessity. Necessity actually being the main driver.
Yes.
Most American Italian food, at least as we perceive it, heavy in tomato, your pizzas, calzones, lasagnas, that kind of stuff, comes from southern Italy and Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
Those flavor combinations. They're also the poorest, typically, and historically in Italy. Came over, and suddenly there was this space that had an overabundance of meat because America was one of the few places that had the space to raise a ton of cows. Meat was considered a delicacy, and suddenly it was very, very cheap. So it started getting added to dishes to allow for better nutrition. Chinese American food is actually very much the same. People came over. It's typically from southern China, where people immigrated a lot of times after the communists came down. So you'll see a lot of Cantonese, and specifically Toisan from our area of San Francisco. And you will see fusions with the flavors that were already established in that area. So Asian American food will actually taste different slightly based off of availability of ingredients for the main places where Chinese people immigrated from, which is Vancouver, San Francisco, LA, and Panama were the big ones. So Asian food in Panama is going to taste different than Asian food in San Francisco. It has to do with the availability of ingredients. A really common one is broccoli. There's so many different varieties of broccoli that appear all around the world, but generally have the same sort of texture and serve the same purpose in the dish.
Oh.
Awesome.
Damn, Eli. Okay. I'm still going to need you to track down the origins of tomato beef chow mein, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam, side note, write this down. I think we are forming our Chinese historical foods Avengers.
Okay.
Just saying.
Yes.
Okay. Just remember that for later. Eli, I need to know how you got interested in becoming a food historian.
I actually had a sort of a rocky career path leading into college. I originally wanted to go into politics. That wrecked my mental health, had to leave it.
Again, a week of election.
Yeah.
I think that's very fair to say.
Yeah. I then thought about going into programming for video games. Realized I wasn't into that. Did 5 years of math at high school. Didn't need to do more. Then thought about going into broadcasting, specifically sports broadcasting. And for fun, and this was the real indication, I took a history class despite not needing it. And the professor was so amazing. She is a slavery historian that focuses on colonial slavery in the United States. And essentially told me I was going to get a history degree. And when a 4'10" Jewish woman who studies slavery for a living tells you to do something, you do it.
Awesome.
And while I was trying to find my niche and what I wanted to study, I thought about studying religion. And the history of religion has always been a passion of mine. And I found this political cartoon from the 1800s about how godly men don't drink. Godly men give up all alcohol. And the ungodly man drinks their paycheck away and beats their wife and neglects their children. And I became fascinated. And then I found out that my favorite American writer, and in my opinion, the best American writer to ever exist, Frederick Douglass, thought that the elimination of alcohol would bring about the end of slavery. And I went, that's wild. I need to know more. And then I just sort of went down this rabbit hole of temperance and prohibition, those two movements in the United States. And I never looked back. I will occasionally look back at religion history.
Damn.
It was a political cartoon.
Wow.
A political cartoon, Frederick Douglass, and the Ken Burns documentary on the 18th Amendment.
It's so interesting because I'm always like, oh, let me talk to these people that are related to food. And I'm thinking there's going to be some like core childhood memory that's like this food thing or this one time. And it's like, nope, this random thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Which is not that it's not interesting. I mean, in some ways it's like more fascinating. It's just really funny the ways in which we find a thing. Also, you're too young to say you had some rocky career start. Like you're a baby.
I feel like I should emphasize I am 30.
No, that's not.
I actually did have to drop out of college at one point.
That's not your career.
No.
That's not. Nope.
How I got into the field I am now, my professor looked at me and went, "Congratulations, you have a history degree. You can teach or go into museums." And I went, "I hate children."
That's fair. Yeah.
But yeah, no, food and alcohol history was a interest that I took in my adult life. I didn't even really drink before legal age. I had no interest in it. I wasn't interested in food. It's something I took for granted. Living in San Francisco with the wide variety that was there, I had no interest in it. And then it turns out there was a food historian on staff who took me under her wing. And this is unfortunately a tragic story. I was her last student because I was writing my thesis on naming conventions of drinks and perceptions of ideals in the 20s and 30s. And she drowned in a tragic accident.
Oh, that's terrible.
And it affected me for the rest of my life. That's part of the reason I haven't gone back to academia. Just sort of coping with that.
Yeah.
But I super recommend her book. It's not a food history book. It is a Asian race history book. And it's called Little Manila is in the Heart by Dawn Mabalin. It is about the rejuvenation of Little Manila in somewhere in the East Bay.
Okay. Oh, in Stockton. I've looked this up. I'm adding it to lists.
Yeah, super, super, super recommend her book. It's one of the few about American Filipino history, especially for something so hyper-local in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've actually seen, but on my backpack that I carry around with me everywhere, I have a button in honor of her.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'll have to look.
Yeah, so highly recommend that book.
Okay. Let's go back to Stollen.
Okay.
Eli.
Yes.
You have eaten this many times as a child.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Tell me about that.
This is a traditional Christmas dish, as similar as sort of like a Christmas ham in English culture, or again, the most similar is actually Italian panettone. They both actually contain the same ingredients, although panettone is definitely going to be a lot more lighter, whereas Stollen is going to be a lot heavier. It is a cultural thing. You sort of make one batch every year. The batch, I know at least the version I have, makes 4 loaves. And then you slowly eat it over the Advent season. So if you actually want to make this for the Christmas and Advent season, you actually have to start thinking about making it in mid to late November.
I haven't even started my Christmas lists by then.
Why is that?
It does require fermenting for at least 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a fermented, old, sitting around yeasty bread that makes as much as my youngest child, I think, in volume, is what I'm hearing.
There's certain ideas about why it became associated with Christ in the name Christstollen. One is that it was sort of to represent the gifts given to the baby Jesus at Christmas. Another was that it was supposed to represent the baby Jesus, as in like size.
Okay. See, I made a
Oh.
joke and then it
Oh my
turns out
God.
that it's true. Wow. What was it like for you to eat this at Christmas?
So the main reason I personally didn't like it is that it's not very sweet.
Okay.
It's very dense. Like one slice will fill you up, which also meant that I couldn't eat other Christmas sweets.
Mm.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
It also has a very strong alcoholic flavor.
Oh. Is there booze in it or is this just the fermentation?
No, you actually put rum extract as one of the ingredients.
Oh. Okay.
Great. Okay. Hard pass. Keep going.
So those flavors to a child, especially one who grew up in America where Christmas sweets tend to be more like cookies, gingerbreads, icings,
Mhm.
that's just an unappealing flavor.
Yeah.
I can tolerate it now. It's still not a flavor I enjoy, but the sweetness comes from a lot of fruit.
And you don't like the texture of hot fruit.
I don't like the texture of hot fruit.
Okay. It's all adding up.
Yeah. There are sweeter versions. This is a very non-sweet version that you can get at Christmas time at like World Market.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I recommend if you want to try it, purchase it first. The loaves are huge. They sell them in smaller sections. They tend to be a little bit sweeter. It is outright not worth the effort if you don't know if you like it.
That's fair.
If you buy it and like it, you can try this one, but I would not recommend this going in blind.
Okay, that's fair. That no one needs 4 loaves of this. Do you think that someone just made 4 loaves at the beginning of time and then they've just been passing them around forever? This is my theory on fruitcakes. There's only like a dozen in existence anywhere.
So there is actually a Dresden Stollen festival where sort of the running history about it is that they made one that weighed something like 100 kilos.
Wow.
And they have this big knife. They choose a Stollen Mädchen, which is a Stollen girl.
Oh boy.
And she's the representative of the main Stollen manufacturer in Dresden.
Wow. So you're telling me that my theory is wrong and they are making more of them and people are eating them. Okay.
And they keep making them bigger.
Then they keep making them bigger. Baby Jesus isn't getting bigger? You don't gotta make the breads bigger.
What are some of the typical fruits that go into this?
Yeah, I mean, we can also start going over the ingredients, which is an adventure on its own.
Yeah.
Please, I've heard a little bit of like the measurement, and I would like you to share this further because it's wild.
Absolutely. So the first ingredient is 2 pounds of flour.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Plus an additional half cup reserved. Not from that 2 pounds, an additional half cup.
Nice. It's all the flour in our house.
Yeah. 5 tablespoons of yeast.
Wow. Okay.
That's a whole jar. Okay.
Sorry, not tablespoons. 5 teaspoons of yeast.
Oh, okay.
Still an excessive amount.
Still a lot. Yeah.
1.5 cups of sugar.
Oh, see? Not enough for 2 pounds. Not. Okay, I get it.
2 sticks of butter. 2 cups of milk. And now we get into the fruit and add-ons. And I will say, as I read this out, it is going to sound like too much for the dough. And it is. They just sort of fall out and you kind of squish them back on.
Okay, read that. But also, those sugar and butter measurements are wildly too small for that amount of flour. This is already, I get it. Okay, I see. And we compensate with fruit. Okay, give us the fruit.
You start off with 1 pound of golden raisins.
What?
Wow.
Okay. I mean, I like a golden raisin. Don't get me wrong. It's my favorite of all the raisins.
1 pound of them.
Not 1 pound of them at a time.
So yeah, it makes 4 loaves. So that's 1/4 pound every loaf.
Oof, that's a lot of raisins.
1 cup of slivered almonds.
That's a lot of almonds. Okay.
1 cup of dried currants.
I do like those too.
1 tub of diced candied citron.
Oh.
I see where I see.
It comes in the syrup. So you have to sort of scoop out the syrup into the dough.
Oh, yeah, well, yes. I mean, the dough clearly needs more syrup and moisture.
Yes.
Okay.
1 small tub of diced lemon peel, candied. and 1 small tub of diced orange peel. Then this is an optional thing.
Lay it on us.
You take an entire tube of marzipan.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
And you can either work it into the dough, which is what typically we do, or you can form it into a log and wrap the dough around it.
Oh, so like a marzipan center?
Yes. Like the weirdest Scotch egg you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When you buy them from the store for trying, most of them will come with the marzipan center.
Really?
Yes, that is actually standard at this point in sort of making it. Working the marzipan into the dough is just a thing because we can't stand just biting into a full bite of marzipan.
A marzipan core.
You need the rind from a full lemon, but no lemon juice.
Wow. Okay.
We didn't have enough lemon already?
Yeah.
And then you need 2 teaspoons of almond extract,
That I'm into. Okay.
2 teaspoons of rum extract,
Nope. Hard pass.
and then 2 teaspoons of cardamom.
Oh. Okay. This is adding up.
Mhm.
And a tablespoon of salt.
Oh, boy. It's funny how every time we're like, nope, no, again, just, okay. Well, you know what? I'm not going to yuck anyone's yums because clearly people like this and that is for them, but that is not for you. And I don't think it is for us either. This recipe is wild, but what I really want to know, Eli, we have called this the revenge recipe. Why did you bring us this dish that you hate?
Mostly because this is my grandmother's family recipe. And being a food historian, family recipes are not good. Family recipes are the indication of what a society is eating and how people grow up. And when you keep that secret, that fundamentally ruins our ability to look back on the past and figure out why people ate the way they did. So this recipe is very different from a traditional Dresden Stollen. And because she kept so much secret about why she did these certain things, I don't know how to research how this recipe moved through Germany and how Christmas celebrations and family get-togethers changed. My grandmother is passed away, so I have no qualms about giving out her recipe because I fundamentally disagree that family recipes should be secret.
I feel like you're being very generous in this answer.
She also would not have liked me as a person in the way I grew up, but that's conversation for a different day. But
I mean, gently, I think the conversation, and we can edit this out. You let me know. Truly. But like the idea, that like we have people in our family that low-key suck.
yeah, I mean, the thing about my grandmother is I didn't really know her. She passed away when I was, I believe, 9. And at the time I was heartbroken. But my last memory of her was helping clean out her stuff and seeing books that fundamentally I don't agree with. Not to bring up the election, but very politically and my own morals. And while those are a big contributing factor, at the very baseline, when it comes to how families interact and how we perceive them later on, food is such a huge connecting factor among families. And I don't believe those should be kept secret. Because what happens if I don't have children and I cannot pass this recipe down and I've decided to keep it secret? Then this recipe dies with me, and there are people who love this recipe. It's a conversation about values.
Yeah.
And also conversation about, going back to how recipes changed over time when they came to America. Because America is such a melting pot of cultures, seeing how those recipes change and seeing how those recipes are carried on shows how Americans value their culture. Food is the biggest indication of how we sort of interact as a people. keeping these things secret makes it so much harder to observe them later on.
That's so interesting. I mean, I guess what's coming up for me is like you are really putting into words more eloquently and like scholarly, even some things that have been driving why we do this show and why it started. Of just the idea that, and in kind of a larger way, but like I think when, I first thought of the show, and actually, Sam, when you and Margot did the first episode, a lot of it was around like, what are we eating at home that we think is just like so unique to us, or like our own secret shame, or is just this weird family thing. And so we don't talk about it. And then come to find out like, oh, actually, it's a very standard like Hong Kong dish.
Yeah.
But we don't know because we don't talk about it. And so I think what you're saying is like, even sort of in a like larger scheme of like history and through generations, if you can't talk about recipes and food, then like, what are you really passing down? And how do you know the ways in which you are connected or unique or some combination thereof to both your family and the larger culture if you don't know where this food came from and how it's changed?
Yeah, and we've actually seen that even with sort of general American culture. One of my interesting facts is just the entire concept of Thanksgiving. We're always sort of taught that Thanksgiving is about colonial era, the Mayflower, whatever. It's not. Thanksgiving is a World War I holiday.
Say more.
Thanksgiving was a minor holiday. And when I say minor, I mean like Arbor Day minor.
Oh, okay. Keep going. I feel like I'm about to learn a lot and get real pissed off about it. Cool.
And it was not celebrated by the larger American community. There was evidence that presidents would have like a special meal on Thanksgiving, but it was not considered a big thing until World War I, where World War I was so devastating and so many people lost something that they needed something to be thankful for. It was hope propaganda. And when you think about the people in World War I, as we think about them in history, they were looking back at their history. And their history was coming here. They took the concept of Thanksgiving, this sort of minor holiday, and made it, thank goodness we're still here because our sons are all dying in the trenches. And they did what all fusion food has done, is use the availability of food there. Turkeys, leftover breads to make stuffings, gravies, because that's what was popular at the time. You've always heard that the original Thanksgiving, which was a real event, was oysters and grains, because that was the availability of time. I don't like oysters. You're not going to make me eat an oyster at Thanksgiving.
Is this why people make oyster stuffing my grandma 20 years ago? Maybe.
That I
don't
can't
know.
answer.
Is that just our family? Oh God, is this one of those? It's just our family. Oh.
But Thanksgiving was a celebration of hope during war. And it stuck. But look at the food that we eat at Thanksgiving, and it's so different than the actual historical event. It's literally just because a few people decided to continue to celebrate Thanksgiving that we know about the history. But otherwise, we would have completely lost what was eaten at that time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, man. Okay. I'm very torn between like, thank you to the people that continued to remember food history and like, so that we can have that as like historical knowledge and things. And then also very upset that we have this dumb brown foods holiday. I love Thanksgiving. Actually, that's like, I like eating all the foods, but they're very brown and
they are. It's
very problematic. And I like it less and less, except for the stuffing. Oof. This one's going to take me a minute to work through the feelings on.
Yeah, food is deeply complicated. I got my degree in alcohol history, and we've lost recipes because they were drank in speakeasies, and they were so protective of them. We don't necessarily know what they were drinking. We just know sort of the after effects, which was everything from public drunkenness to permanent blindness.
Okay. Stollen.
Yes.
You don't like it. You're very well versed in making it.
Yes, because it is a tradition made every year. And up until this year, we always made it for my grandfather and then gave some away. We recently had to stop because it kept spiking his blood sugar and making his diabetes go whack.
Oh, man.
Oh, was he not stopping at the one slice rule?
Typically, you want to actually eat about half a slice.
Oh,
because the one thing I did not mention in the ingredients is that you let it ferment in butter and powdered sugar.
Wow. Okay.
Wait, what?
So after you bake the loaf, you lay out heavy-duty aluminum foil. You coat, so it's a thick layer of coating of confectioner's sugar. Brush the whole thing with melted butter. Place it on, and then cover the whole thing in powdered sugar. You take it, you wrap it up real tightly. You want to wrap that up like 2 or 3 times. And then you just leave it for like 2 weeks in a cool, dryish place.
Oh, God, just hanging out.
Yeah.
In the okay. Well,
you typically wrap it up multiple times in aluminum foil.
Sure. Okay.
That helps. Like, you don't want any sugar to escape. We've never had an ant risk with it.
I mean, yeah, that's,
but yeah, and then you let those flavors meld and the sugar kind of penetrate that first crust layer.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. And that's what helps keep it moist. It gives it a little bit more sweetness. It lets the flavors meld. So yeah, he would eat too much too fast and then it would spike his blood sugar.
Oh my God.
Boy. Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like this is beneficial to everyone else too, that you don't have to make it this year and then give away the other.
It is easiest to make it with 2 or 3 people. The process reminds me of making, I only know the Toisan word for it, dong. The rice tamales.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Have you made those, by the way?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We do salt the eggs.
Nice.
The other recommendation, if you do want to make it, is I recommend making it in some sort of tub. You probably don't have a bowl big enough to also knead it.
Yes.
So we use just a big plastic tub we got at a Chinese tchotchke store.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Baby baths work really well.
Oh my God. We have that. We could do this.
Yeah, just make sure you wash it out real well.
Like a kiddie pool.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Because you're starting off, and it isn't like you slowly add the 2 pounds of flour. You start out with the 2 pounds of flour, make a well, and then pour everything in.
Jesus Christ. I mean, yeah, Jesus Christ. That's how we got here.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that your grandmother's recipe differs from the traditional Dresden one.
Yes. The traditional Dresden one, well, part of it is I don't know the exact differences because I refuse to eat it, any version of it.
Okay.
But the traditional Dresden one at this point seems to have the marzipan in the center. They tend to be a little bit sweeter. And I don't know how much of that is just making the product commercially available because you can order this online from Dresden. But typically those tend to be a little bit sweeter. In my personal taste, a little bit more palatable. They tend to lean more on the cake side versus the bread side, whereas this recipe is definitely a bread.
Right.
I don't know how much influence Stollen has had over time. I know at the beginning it was very much just like flour, water, yeast. But I don't know how much influence panettone has had, or fruit cakes, or figgy pudding. Especially as Europe became more and more interconnected, all those flavors definitely became interconnected. I know at the very base level, this version has a rum flavor, and rum could not have existed without the sugarcane of the Caribbean and the places where it's possible to make rum out of those heavily sugared products.
We know your grandmother is no longer with us, and you can't ask her why she made these changes, but do you have any kind of guesses? I
suspect this wasn't her. I suspect this was either her mother or her grandmother, possibly even great-grandmother. So she, was born in Germany, My grandfather was born in Germany. They're both from northern Germany. My grandfather's from a larger city. My grandmother's from a smaller city. And I have full suspicion that these changes happened over experimentation, personal tastes, and just over the years. That's typically how things change, at least on the family level. Not to reinforce gender stereotypes, but if the wife is making something and the husband doesn't like it, she's not going to make it again.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
This is a food that's traditional to eat, so it likely wouldn't have been cut out, but it would have been modified to accommodate tastes. I don't personally know if other Stollen has rum extract as a part of it. I've never looked too deep into it. I don't like this dish.
Got it.
Okay. Hard pivot. What's a dish you do like?
I like many things. I really like sauerbraten, which is a sort of a combination of a pot roast that you have to marinate for 3 days.
What is... Okay.
German food is great.
Who has the time? Germans.
Interestingly enough, a lot of the food I don't like is Chinese, partially for the texture reason. A lot of cornstarch, don't like that texture going down.
Okay, see, and what I was going to ask you is, like, we've talked a lot about the German side of things and not really about the Chinese side. And I was going to say, like, what are the Chinese influences to your Christmas or your holidays or just your everyday growing up? And it sounds like you didn't like those either.
So that actually, the Chinese side tends to go more towards the day-to-day. So rice is definitely the staple grain in my household. Christmas has a Chinese influence that you wouldn't expect. It's a very Americana story where my grandfather on my Chinese side came over as an orphan, and to gain his citizenship, he served in World War II as a cook. So his cooking library was Americana food. So Christmas is actually those very World War II recipes, like a full roast. So Christmas is very much in a Chinese American story where, tea will be served, but so will the roast and the potatoes and, the Christmas ham and things like that. It's sort of a very interesting immigration story. I did grow up with some Chinese food, although my taste definitely leaned away from the dishes that use a lot of cornstarch. So I love me a fried rice. Honey walnut prawns are my favorite dish.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So Asian food tends to lessen quite a bit around Christmas time and tends to be more towards other times of the year. German food is when we have the time and want to eat excessive amounts of meat and cabbage.
Got it. What was it like for you in the everyday then, like as a kid? Because you grew up in San Francisco, right?
Yes.
You are, it sounds like, 3rd plus generation.
My mother was born in San Francisco as well, in Chinatown. Her parents were born in China. My father was born in Germany.
Okay.
When I think about childhood food and the childhood staples, I think Mexican and Japanese.
Oh my God! Me too! Oh, this is the weird growing up Hapa in San Francisco experience. Say more about that.
And again, those are influenced by coming over, the changes. We talk about Americanized sushi. We talk about Tex-Mex and this sort of Americanization of Mexican food. It's not a bad thing. A lot of people talk about fusion and Americanized foods as a bad thing. It's not. It came out of availability of ingredients. It came out of differing palates. It comes out of a necessity to feed each other in a way that sort of feels familiar, but is catered to personal taste, and it sort of isn't. It's fun and exciting, and Americanized or fusion foods are sort of the staple for a lot of people. The issue is that we don't call it fusion food. You're not likely to say, let's go get Italian-American food. You're likely to just say, let's go for Italian.
Yeah.
And that's where that sort of confusion comes from. But these sort of dishes are part of the experience of living in a place where a bunch of cultures can get together.
Yes. All of that. And please still go back. Mexican, Japanese. Why
Yes.
was that your childhood thing?
I think partially because it was different.
Oh.
Because my father grew up with German food and was tired of it, and my mother grew up with Chinese food and was tired of it. And the fun and exciting things that they ate is when they could go out and get Japanese and Mexican and Thai and Vietnamese and other cuisines that they didn't see as the day-to-day. And they carried that when they had me because, again, they ate that all the time. Why would they want to eat it as adults with free will? They'll have it occasionally, but not the everyday. So while they raised me, the palate that I grew up with was very much more tailored to these sort of dishes they couldn't have as children.
Oh, that's so interesting. Eli, were your parents cooking Mexican, Japanese for you? Were they like,
yes
was
and no.
it a lot of going out or?
I would say it was about 50-50.
Okay.
I actually ended up being the one that sort of cooked more Japanese dishes, simply because during the pandemic, we got addicted to NHK, started making them. So at home, we would have like sushi rice and those little packets of seaweed and just like kind of put it on, eat it. We just had that last night with fried Spam on top.
We eat that.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, another thing that sort of kind of influenced how I grew up was the inclusion of Hawaiian flavors. Simply because I am mixed race, and Hawaii is sort of one of the first places where you see that very direct blending of cultures. And so Hawaiian flavors sort of became the closest thing I had to a solid identity.
Say more about that, please.
When you go to family reunions and you are the white cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's difficult because the two sides of my family never get together and I'm always the odd one out.
Right.
My white side does not live in California anymore, so I don't see them as often. So I mostly see my Chinese side, and it becomes very, very obvious when, my cousin made an offhand joke about, this other cousin is being so scandalous. He's not dating a Chinese girl. He's dating a Korean girl.
Oh
boy. And it was said as a joke, and everyone understood the joke, but there is something to that where, there's still Asian.
Yeah.
There's still that community, and being very distinctly white and Chinese did put me as an outcast. I had a lot of instances in my youth, both with family and with the schooling I got, because I went to a 98% Chinese school.
Did we go to the same school? Have we never talked about this?
Do you want to mention what school you went to?
I went to Lowell. I'm very upfront about this.
Oh, no, I went to West Portal Lutheran.
Oh, I went to West Portal Elementary.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. I was rejected from Lowell.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah. I went to Mercy.
Okay. Oh, Eli. Oh,
yeah.
Well, okay. Well, sorry, listeners. This is very inside San Francisco, but if you know, you know. This is a very IYKYK moment. Wow. Okay.
But I had a lot of these instances where people would specifically not want me to hear something. So they would speak in Chinese around me because they knew I don't speak Chinese.
Oh.
And that was very much to make sure that I could not listen in. And that's, very isolating.
Yeah.
And when you hear about a culture where being mixed race is not as big of a deal, they have their own identity. And a lot of it is around food. That is very appealing, which is actually part of the reason if I were to ever go back and get my PhD, I want to write about alcohol propaganda and its effect on Hawaii in particular.
Oh.
And essentially how our perception of Hawaii was very influenced by how we drank alcohol.
What?
Yeah.
Give me the 20-second version of that.
World War II happens. All of a sudden, a territory of the United States is attacked by a fascist regime. Like, there's
Sure.
World War II is easy enough in the sense of, like, on the surface, very clear evil guys.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you have these boys from Iowa and Wyoming who sign up for the war and are being sent to a place that's humid, it's hot, there's tons of sugar, there are flavors they've never experienced. And they're going, hey, try this alcohol, we'll mix it with pineapple juice for you. You're going to do it on your off time on this grass hut on the beach surrounded by palm trees. You get suddenly introduced to what we now know as tiki culture.
Mm-hmm.
And the first stop to the South Pacific is Hawaii, because there's nothing else in between.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see this place that is warm and full of beautiful fish and has these amazing trees, and then you're sent back to Wyoming in the winter.
This is true.
They wanted to bring these flavors back home, and it was sort of the creation of tiki bar drinking and the first wave of tiki culture. Well, those stories are what's being brought back about this territory that people really don't know about. You know, they knew about Hawaii in the same way that we kind of know about our territories right now.
Uh-huh.
Like, I know of them.
Right.
Couldn't tell you much about them.
No.
And all of a sudden, there's all this attention on Hawaii. And it is both good in the fact that there's suddenly a lot of money being poured into this community, but also bad because they're sort of taking the surface level of, like, they went there as a stop while they were in the Navy, and then they headed out to, the Philippines. And that has completely changed how we perceive Hawaii. Even to this day, when you think about typical tourism to Hawaii, and that's sort of how I want to approach that and figure out how exactly that happened and, where these ports are, because you see tiki culture being strongest where the ports are. I believe it was either San Francisco or Oakland that had the first tiki bar.
Mm-hmm.
They both argue about who invented a bunch of tiki drinks.
The raised pizza of tiki culture.
Yeah. You see it a lot in San Diego. You see it a lot in LA. You see it a lot in Seattle. Although less in Seattle because it's not warm.
Yeah. This just kind of actually brings me back to one of our spam episodes and talking about, like,
God, I love spam.
Yes, must. But also just like spam and army presence.
Yeah.
Military presence. And those two are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
And the ways in which military presence just has its fucking claws in everything and we don't even realize it.
Oh, absolutely. You got to take it for what it is. It's a very interesting thing to look at. I was not personally a military historian. I was a alcohol and culture and law historian, as previously said. Mm-hmm. So I looked about how those three interacted.
That's so fascinating. I didn't know this when we started this episode. I would have gone in a whole different way, but no, I love it.
I must have told you I'm an alcohol historian.
I knew the alcohol part. I didn't know the food, culture, law part of things.
You're going to have me back on and I'll just tell you what my thesis was.
We are going to have to do another episode is what I'm saying to you now. So let's just plan that. But also, I think what I was really curious when you said sort of identifying with Hawaiian flavors, just the idea that we can identify with flavor profiles, right? That identity is made up of so many things.
Yeah.
And I sometimes not on the show, but I've talked about the ways in which I wish I identified, or I wish I'd claimed certain musical tastes as a teen. I was oh, that's an exception for me, but really it was who I am. But I didn't know that. And so I didn't work that into my identity. Mm-hmm. And so, you saying you identify with Hawaiian flavors and those profiles is just another way in which I think our identity is made up of so many things beyond just physical or the kind of big markers of identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just love that this is another avenue for that.
And I think most people have them in ways that they don't even understand. Even going very, very hyper specific with Asian culture, I'm sure many people would consider it a crime to put like Kikkoman soy sauce in a Chinese dish.
Mm.
The flavors are completely different from how the soy sauces are made, and they don't work crossed over.
Is that why everything tastes wrong for me? Because I am not discerning in my soy sauce. I say when I make it. When I make it, it's
Actually, you've recently bought those like fancier soy
yes.
sauces.
I did. I did do a soy sauce upgrade, and we do like
this.
them more. That's true.
And check to see what characters are on it, because it might be a Chinese soy sauce.
I mean, that's a really good point. But just in terms of like when I think about, I've said a lot how like I feel intimidated by cooking Chinese food because I feel like I'm always going to mess it up or it's not going to be quite right. And I grew up eating so much restaurant Chinese food that like I'll never achieve that. And even lately, I've been, cooking more things from Chinese Enough. Shout out Christina. It's a great book. And I'm always like, did I get the right thing though? Is this how it's supposed to taste? And I don't really know. And I'm like, well, it's not restaurant. Now, what you've brought up is like, maybe it is in these subtleties that I've really taken for granted of being like, soy sauce is a soy sauce. Like I know, or brown sugar is a brown sugar. And I know that it's not the exact one, but it's close enough. But now I'm thinking I should pay more attention to this stuff.
I do actually also have an answer as to why restaurant food does taste different than what you make at home. And that's because the chef at a restaurant does not care about your cholesterol levels.
No, that's also true.
Yeah.
The chef at a restaurant will just throw in butter.
Yeah.
Or your sodium levels.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Or, I don't have a 900-year-old wok that is always on. Never off.
Yeah, restaurant food is not a great look at what food was like eaten in homes and stuff. I don't know if you watch any food historians, but there's a couple of good ones, and they talk a little bit about the importance of women's clubs cookbooks.
Oh, what is a women's club cookbook?
So there are women's clubs, and think of it like a knitting club where women would get together, and oftentimes they would put out cookbooks.
Okay.
And it was their family recipes that the intention was to raise money for the women's club and also share their recipes with the other women. That is the most accurate indication of what people were eating at home. Not necessarily like what the Ritz-Carlton was making in the 1930s, but these sort of women's club cookbooks where they were telling you about how to save money on meat during the Great Depression.
Huh. This is funny because related, sort of, we actually got an email from a listener. Thank you, Jonathan. Yay. But he sent us a link to a book called Invitation to a Banquet, and it's the story of Chinese food. Do you know this?
I don't.
Okay. I mean, I haven't read it yet because I'm just now looking at the link for the third time. But it's familiar, right? And I think like that's the women's club is super interesting in terms of like understanding how people were eating in sort of like the 50s and like of that era. And I guess like the link for me here is like, what's the Asian American version of that?
I believe there's some.
Really?
Yeah, women's clubs were everywhere.
They sound very white to me, if I'm honest.
It's a very Midwestern thing.
Yeah.
But the issue is actually going through and searching for these cookbooks because they were often paper bound. They were often used while someone was cooking, so they're covered in food. And also, I'm just going to be real, some of the food isn't very good.
Yes.
I highly recommend Tasting History with Max Miller. He's a YouTuber. He talks about making old recipes. And then for a sort of fun look at mid-century, these sort of very women's cookbooks, women's club cookbooks and stuff like that, B. Dylan Hollis, he actually has a cookbook called Tasting Yesteryear. He is a British man who's now living in Wyoming who became obsessed with American mid-century. He makes these TikToks where he just makes old recipes, and a lot of them are not good. But you can see as he shifts how tastes have changed because he's making these recipes that are from people who made them. He's not making them from like super published nationwide cookbooks.
Yeah.
And it's everything from a meatloaf that saves on meat by adding bread crust to it. In the Great Depression to a 7-Up Jell-O salad during the Nixon era.
Mm.
Can we just talk about the number of things that were called salads that are truly just an abomination and not a salad at all?
Yeah.
Like, did salad used to mean something else? It's so far off. I can't
Just
wrap my head
cold.
around it. Just cold. Yeah. Eli, this was super fun. We clearly can do like a whole series of other episodes with you. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface on like you as an individual in the way that I would have liked. So like you're definitely coming back on some things.
This was about German Christmas bread at one point.
At one point, this was about German Christmas bread, and it was a revenge for your less than ideal grandmother. And then we ended up in a lot of other places, all fascinating, all great. You're a delight to talk to. I am now looking at photos of what looks to be some kind of Jell-O salad that may or may not have like a nut and also like a savory element.
You gotta include the shrimp.
Yeah. Oh. So anyway, I think we, Sam and I, have a lot to really think about in terms of, what we're not going to make for our kids, the things that we are going to expressly share with them so that the recipes do not die with us and our children can understand why mommy's chow fun tastes different than restaurant chow fun, and that she learned to make it at 43. And I'm definitely not going to make Stollen, but kudos to anyone that wants to, I guess. We will share the recipe, listeners.
Yeah, I know. Again, I cannot recommend enough. Buy it.
Sure.
There are certain things that are not worth it unless you're really into it. And this makes 4 full loaves that have to be fermented for 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I don't
just buy it.
We have too much of an ant problem to even take that risk. But I actually would consider buying this because I do think that my mom and my Norwegian stepfather might enjoy this.
Yeah, honestly, it's a very Northern European dish. They might have even heard of it. It's really it's like $10 at World Market.
Okay, that sounds much
and
better.
And it comes in half loaves, so you don't spike your diabetes eating a full loaf.
That sounds like a worthwhile investment. Eli, where can people find you if they would like to enjoy more of you as we are?
If you would like to find me and ask me more questions about Hittite bees and the development of alcohol in the United States, you can find me doing nerd photography at Crown of Stars Photography on Instagram.
Beautiful. It's great. I've seen it. It's great. If you all would like to find us, you can find us at worstqualitycrab.com. You can find us on Instagram at worstqualitycrab, or you can email us like Jonathan did. Thank you. worstqualitycrabpod@gmail.com. Listeners, we will put up Eli's wild ass recipe. Just get your 2 pounds of flour ready, and then probably also a link to where you can order this, because let's be real, that is the more appropriate choice. But if you're curious,
if you can order an authentic one and it comes in a nice metal dish, it's very convenient.
But if you wanted to, have some sort of like neighborhood Stollen party where everybody comes over and you all like do a thing, and then maybe, I don't know, at the end you each get a half loaf. I'm just thinking about how to make this fun. But then you would still have to eat it at the end, and this one doesn't actually sound good. Sorry, no offense to your grandma. But anyway, we'll get the recipe for fun, because why not? Find it on our website. Eli, we'll have to figure out when you come back and for what topic of so many that you could talk about. And still, I want to ask you about you some more, because you are too good about knowing other things.
It's a skill.
Yeah, way to skirt the core of this show. But that's fine. I like it. This is the anti-show. Anyway, you're great. This is great. Listeners, I hope you had as much fun as we did. Sorry if this one... Well, you know what? I'm not sorry. This is the anti-show. We told you that at the beginning. It's awesome. Enjoy. We'll see what happens next. We'll talk to everybody next time. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
I feel like I still need to explain the bee thing.
Explain the bee thing.
Yeah, so I wrote a paper on the importance of mead in Hittite culture, which led me down a rabbit hole of how bees were legislated in Hittite culture, because mead was considered sacred and therefore bees were considered sacred. And anyway, all you need to know is that was a law on the books, or on the stone, because they didn't have books back then, of the punishment for stealing a hive of bees.
Wow.
What was the punishment?
Yeah.
I think you were flogged.
Oh. That's
appropriate, I guess.
And nobody had sort of focused or compiled on bees yet, so I sort of became a pseudo-expert.
okay. I mean,
Yep.
Hey, look, listen, you don't even have to be an expert to call yourself an expert these days. So you, as far as I'm concerned, are the world's foremost leading expert on Hittite bee law.
I have considered going back for my master's just so I could figure out what's going on with these bees.
Look, you're going to get another degree. Let's just name that right now, right here.